Hi, everyone. Welcome to the co-sponsorship training. My name is Jenny. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist here in Atlanta, and that means that I work with volunteers and community partners. So in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about Inspiritus, who a refugee client is, different legal classifications for other people who are migrating, and just some general information on how to be a good co-sponsorship team. So I'm looking forward to walking alongside you with this presentation. Here at Inspiritus, our mission is to walk alongside our clients from surviving to thriving. So a lot of times that's meeting the client at the very beginning, which is the basic needs. With time and the resources available here, that leads into stability and safety. And then further down the road with community integration, which is a big part of what our volunteers do, and then eventually self-sufficiency. You will also hear me throughout this presentation refer back to our mission statement. And a little bit about who we welcome and serve here at Inspiritus. We work with refugees and asylees. I'll go into those definitions a little bit later. We also work with immigrants and migrants impacted by detention. This is relatively new with our volunteer program, Team Libertad, where we have volunteers meet people who are being released from Stewart Detention Center at the airport to walk alongside them to make sure they're getting to their appropriate flights. We also have post-release and home study case managers who walk alongside any unaccompanied immigrant children. So these were the children that were arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border on their own. And a little bit about who a refugee is. So this is somebody who has actively fled their home country and is currently in a refugee camp, typically in a neighboring country. So they have fled their home for one of five reasons. That could be race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership of a particular social group. A lot of individuals who are classified as refugees cannot return home. They have fled for their lives. Some other legal classifications for people who've been forced to flee their homes. We commonly see asylum seekers. So these are people who are arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border typically, seeking asylum. So it's a different process from the refugee clients in where that they go through the whole asylum process typically um, in the United States. If they are over the age of 18, then they are being more than likely they're going to be detained at an immigrant detention center until they're able to see a judge who will determine if they have a valid asylum case. And we also work with humanitarian parolee clients. So you've probably heard of this term recently come up in the news. It's relative to Ukraine and Afghanistan. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we had a lot of people fleeing from their homes and arriving to the US-Mexico border. And they were given a very temporary status called humanitarian parolee status. Typically, it's only temporary for about 2 years, in which they have permission to be here in the United States. And within those 2 years, they are tasked with finding some form of permanent situation, legal remedy to stay here in the United States. This also happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban taking over. So when that happened, I'm sure everyone remembers the news about how everybody was in Afghanistan were fleeing to the airports. Anyone who made it here to the United States in that time was given also humanitarian parolee status. And like I said before, it is temporary. Luckily, here at Inspiritus, we have our immigration department, and they have been actively applying for asylum for a lot of our Afghan clients to make sure that they have some permanent status here in the United States. And we haven't seen the other side of it all, and we have been seeing approvals for some of the asylum applications. So that's always some good news. Some other people who have been forced to flee their home are people who are internally displaced. So these are people who have not had the chance yet to escape their country. And there's also stateless people. These are people who do not identify with the nationality of the country, and that means that they usually lack a lot of basic human rights. I've seen this happen a lot with indigenous populations. Just some facts about the refugee crisis. The reason I want to tell you about this is just to give you a bigger picture of it all. There's about 27 million refugees in the world, and about half of them are children. So just to give you a little bit of insight on that. And like I said, there are different legal classifications. This is just in regards to our refugee clients. And a lot of times, people end up growing up in these refugee camps. And the whole process does take very, very long time. It can be anywhere from 2 to 18 years. So there can be entire generations who have grown up at these camps. And like I said before, they there were a lot of our refugee clients have to go through a very extensive, very long waiting period in these camps. And this slide goes into that specifically. So the first step with the whole refugee process is the refugee client leaving their home country and then registering with the UNHCR, which typically happens at the refugee camp. UNHCR is seen as a global, kind of a global entity for refugee resettlement. From there, they're going through very extensive bio data, facial scans, and many other background checks. And if they are approved from that, then the US government gets involved with 8 different agencies also doing their own individual checks. It could be background checks, family interviews, bio data. And then if the client passes that, then they are referred to an NGO. In this case, for Inspiritus, our NGO is Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. And if they're going to be placed here in Atlanta, then Inspiritus steps in. So it seems very to the point here with this slide. I really want you to grasp that it does take a very long time, and that it looks really neat here, but it's very messy in real life. And like I said before, so it first starts with the State Department, and then from there, the State Department refers to one of the many NGOs, and our NGO specifically is Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. So the cooperative agreement. So this is an agreement between the government, Department of State, and each domestic resettlement agency, and that specifies the needs and the service that have to be provided by the agency to each client. So we are obligated to provide many services that I'll talk about in a bit. These are some of the services that we are required to give every single refugee client. It's making sure they're enrolled in school, making sure that they uh, have all of these services met. As a co-sponsorship group, we do ask that you do help us out with some of these core services. So although it may look very scary right here on the screen, and we only ask co-sponsors help out with about 8 of them. And with that being said, you'll be working with the case manager. You will never be left alone in this whole process. Some of them can be super easy, like taking the client to the health screening. That saves a big chunk of the day for the case manager. Another really easy one is school enrollment. And it's also the airport pickup is also pretty easy as well. So there are other government funded programs for our refugee clients. A big one is Match Grant. So this is a program that provides financial incentives to clients who can keep and maintain a job. And then there's also Preferred Communities, which is a program here in Inspiritus called Intensive Case Management. And so this is a program specifically geared towards people who are struggling more than our other clients to adjust to life here in the United States. I have seen more single mothers and medically fragile people in this program. So, just to give you a little bit of background, it's about for about a year, and they have some pretty good results coming out from that too. And what specifically is a co-sponsorship? So, this is a very special relationship between the agency and Spiritus, the group, and the family. So this is a really a team effort here. Like I said, there are about 8 core services that we ask the co-sponsorship walk alongside the family with. In that situation, it could be half of the core service. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. We can have the case manager do the appointment for Social Security, and then the group helping out with the actually attending it in person. So it's a really unique way to kind of alleviate some of the burden on the staff and give the group a way to connect with the family further. And the difference between a co-sponsorship and a private sponsorship. You've probably heard of that with Uniting for Ukraine and sponsor circles. With that, there's a huge difference, being that resettlement agencies are not as involved or it not very involved at all with private sponsorships. It's primarily the group doing all of the core services. Whereas in a co-sponsorship group, you have the support of Inspiritus, the knowledge and the experience that our case managers have, and also just having that reassurance and training from community engagement as well. So some general requirements for our co-sponsorship teams. There is a time commitment, so that's also something you need to keep in mind. So we're about 6 months, but like I said, this or I haven't said yet. I'm sorry. It is for about 6 months, but this is dependent on the family. A lot of times, I've seen some groups only get really heavily involved for about 3 months, and then the next 3 months it's more laid back and more new neighbor type of mode of co-sponsorship and working alongside them in that. I have other groups who have even stayed on longer, so it really depends on the family. There's also a financial commitment, in that all team members who are directly involved with the client have to go through a background check. This is for safety purposes. Now, if someone in the group is more seen as support and behind the scenes and is not involved with the client directly, then that is not the case for them. We do not need a background check for that. Each team must have a team leader who signs a commitment form, which specifies which services they can provide, and provide at least 8 core services. Talking about this commitment form, it's not legally binding. It's just that the resettlement agency, in this case us and Spiritus, knows what the group has signed up to do. And that way there's some clarity in approaching these goals. It's just the best way to keep everything clear and concise. And it's also a way for the group to get ahead of things and start to plan out that. Here are some co-sponsored pre-arrival course services that can be done. It could be anything from organizing and picking the team leader. It could be stocking the pantry. It can be setting up the family home or apartment. It could also be the airport pickup, which you will have Inspirited staff there to assist you with. It could be something as simple as doing the ESL school enrollment, which is pretty easy as well. or the kids go enrollment as well, which is also fairly easy. And just some additional services that you can do as a co-sponsorship team besides the core services. You could help out with rent if it's needed. And a lot of times we want to talk to case management first about that. You can be a community guide, start taking the kids, if there are kids in the family, to the zoo or aquarium or to the local park. You can take the family to the local library. So there's a bunch of really fun support activities that you can do with the family as well. And understanding each other's roles. As our role here at Inspiritus is mainly to support the co-sponsorship team. So we will provide the training and be ongoing support for the team. We also will provide all case management for the client. So that will not be the co-sponsorship's responsibility at all. Um, and we will ensure that all the core services are being done in a timely manner. The co-sponsorship team's role is mainly to assist with these core services and just maintaining communication with our team to make sure that all of the goals are being met in a timely manner. So it's mainly as a support. And some practicality of working with our clients. Of course, a lot of our clients have very traumatic past. We ask that you use a trauma-informed care perspective in engaging with the families. It's the best way to kind of understand where they're coming from. So if you need any more information on trauma-informed care, I'm more than happy to sit down and talk to you or show you some videos about that. Some of the really core principles of the trauma-informed care is making sure the client feels physically safe and emotionally safe. Another really big one is trustworthiness and transparency. And a choice is a really big one. Always want to empower our clients to make their own choices. Collaboration is a really, really big one between staff, volunteers, and the family more than anything to support that best decision-making skills. And empowerment and voice. This is so important because, like I said, they've spent a lot of time in these refugee camps where they haven't had many chances to um, advocate for themselves. So we really want to encourage that here once they arrive. Just some general tips on working with people who have experienced trauma. The number one thing I want you to keep in mind is that we do not ask the client what they have been through or how they got here. This is very important because you can get different responses from very different people. A lot of times they will feel obligated to answer your question, which is unfair and violates this whole trauma-informed care perspective that we're trying to have all of our volunteers do. So they might feel obligated to tell you that story, and it might cause an episode where they start to cry, which makes sense because a lot of times when people are retelling something, their body thinks they are reliving it. So I ask that you do not do this, especially because, like I said, we want to focus on that trauma-informed care, and we do not want to harm the client in any way. Now, sometimes it does happen organically where the client will just tell you what happened. And I've been in that situation a couple of times. What I would do in that situation is just talk to the client and try to ground them in their current reality. You're in your new apartment, you're safe, and um, just trying to make sure that they're in that present moment and no longer in that past moment. So always follow the client's lead and only ask about traumatic events if they mention the topic themselves. Like I said, you don't even have to engage with it at all. Um, and please keep their story confidential unless you're given permission by them to share it with others. And if you are given permission, please do not include any identifying information. And number one, another really important thing is that you are coming in to this co-sponsorship relationship with the family as a friend, as a new neighbor, not as a trained social worker or a therapist. So I will, part of communication, what we will do is introduce you as a volunteer and not as somebody who's coming in any professional capacity. And as a friend, you can provide support just by listening and offering your companionship. A lot of times that does great things too. And if you do not need to take on a more significant role in helping the individual process their trauma, because like I said, you want to have those realistic expectations of the time commitment, which will end, and making sure that we're not creating any unsustainable resources to the clients long term. So, some general expectations of our co-sponsors. The number one thing is promoting this self-sufficiency. I will go back to our mission statement where we walk alongside our clients from surviving to thriving. And it's always a path forward. We're not trying to go backward. So we want to make sure that the client um, feels empowered enough to keep doing things on their own as time progresses. We also want to set and maintain those boundaries. Really important because we don't want to create dependencies that will not be there long term. Number one, another really important differences. There will be cultural differences, but we ask that you approach this with an open mind and you understand that those differences. Um, kind of on that topic, we also do not spread our own religion to our clients because they are fleeing everything. They have left everything behind in their home country, careers, houses, pets, you name it, they left it behind for what they believe in. So it's very disrespectful and can be triggering to a client when a volunteer, someone who's supposed to be walking alongside them, is trying to spread their own religion. We always protect each client's confidentiality and we treat clients and staff with respect and kindness. So, what does self sufficiency look like? This is going to look different for a whole bunch of different people. Self sufficiency looks a lot of times being able for the client to provide for their own budget. So that could be maintaining a job at the chicken farm, or it could be, and it could also be them having a small business. So it's self-sufficiency looks different for everyone. We just ask that if you have any questions about the employment part of it all, that you reach out to case managers about that. And in this case, it would be the match grant case manager. So that's the program that um, helps give financial incentives to clients who can keep and maintain a job. We really want to emphasize empowerment. So I would ask the co-sponsorship group to really take this on and really keep it in their hearts. Because although it might be easy for you to do something really quickly for the client, we want to be able to teach them how to do it on their own. Um, so please keep that in mind. Client autonomy. So this means that the client is many times gonna be able to make their own decisions. And like I said, they have been in situations where they haven't been able to. So we really want to encourage that client autonomy to be able to problem solve on their own. Some things to teach refugee clients about life in the United States. So it could be as simple as explaining fire, ambulance, and police services. So you could provide those emergency numbers and explain how they're used. Another really big thing is explaining that by law, young children may not be left unattended. This will also be discussed in their cultural orientation, but you can feel free to emphasize that as well. And explain how things work here. It could be as simple as explaining the phone bill and how calling not long distance can create those um, really big bills. So just explaining that. You can walk them through the post office to explain washers and dryers and teach them how to use that. So there's a lot of little simple ways that you can help um, the clients understand. Another really big thing is, explaining the public transportation. A lot of times the clients had that back home, so it's not too hard to explain, but it's always good to have somebody walk alongside them for the first couple times to see how that works, especially with there being a language barrier. It could be, exploring all these different community resources like the museum, the library. You could even help them open a bank account. You can also help them with resume building and interview skills. So there's a lot of really cool ways that co-sponsorships can get involved in those support services. And maintaining equity of care amongst clients. So please give any large cash or in-kind donations outside of the core support service to our agency so that we can distribute it to the clients most in need to ensure that we are maintaining equity amongst our clients. If you're looking to do a big, large donation, please discuss it with staff first. Here comes the fun part. So, setting those boundaries and why is it so important? The reason I like to talk about this a lot is because I hate seeing volunteers burn out. So, this is one good way to avoid that. So, setting those boundaries is important for both you and the client. Now, let's go back to making sure that we do not recreate these temporary resources that will not be there long term. It's unfair to you and unfair to the client. And it also harms their goal of self-sufficiency. So we definitely don't want to do that. And you can set those boundaries by setting realistic expectations. So talking to the family about the upcoming end date and how you will transition from a co-sponsorship group more to a new neighbor. So, setting those healthy boundaries, you can be very clear with that from the beginning and be consistent. That's also super important. Please be consistent in maintaining those boundaries. We don't want anyone to be confused. And manage those expectations by setting those realistic end dates. And please practice self-care. It's very important. If you start to feel like you're having a hard time going to sleep, please take the necessary measures to either step back or do something that you like to do to make sure that you're able to do this long term. For me, I know I'm burning out when I go to sleep thinking about things that have to be done or something that a client has told me. And what I do in that situation is take a week to really disengage from that and do things that I like to do, whether that be for me personally, plants or books. It's different for everyone, but I encourage you to really look into that while you are volunteering with the client. And here are some common cultural differences between other countries and the United States. Some cultural differences is when and how gratitude is expressed. Here in the United States, we do place a high value of that doing it verbally, whereas in other countries, it can be done in other ways. And we do also use a lot of visual cues here in the United States. So kind of explaining that to our clients is important too for their success. And some time orientation differences, right? That's pretty big. There are two general ways to describe one person's perception regarding time. It could be either time oriented or event oriented. Here in the United States, we're generally time oriented. So that's, operating on a schedule and being on time for those. Another culture is you might find that they're event oriented instead. So just always keeping that in mind. Some gender dynamics too is also a big one. There are cultural differences in how men and women engage with each other. Just so keeping that in mind. Some women might not feel comfortable going with a male volunteer to the store alone. Please be respectful of that, and see if there's a way to accommodate it. Family financial responsibility and remittances. A lot of times, the family will like to give money back to their family back in home country. This is very normal amongst refugees and many other immigrants. And it's also pretty important to them. We just want to make sure they're maintaining their budget so that we can further encourage self sufficiency here. And I already mentioned this a little bit before, but I'll talk about it a bit. Talking about faith, we do not allow for staff or volunteers to try to change the client's beliefs. This is just first, this could stop us from receiving funding, and it is strictly prohibited. And like I said, it's very disrespectful because they have left their home country for everything they believe in. And there is such a thing as respectfully sharing, especially if the client initiates this conversation. If that does happen, feel free to share it. But like I said, we do not want to preach it. You also want to protect confidentiality. This means we do not share any personal information that includes their name, address, health and medical information, and emotional state pictures. Like if you see a client crying, please don't take a picture of them and then share it. So we always want to be mindful of that. And just some tips on how to respect client confidentiality. You always want to ask them what you can and can tell others, and please be respectful when they say no. We do not share names, addresses, phone numbers, or personal circumstances without consent. You also want to be mindful of sharing those activities on any social media because sometimes people could be curious and show up there too. So please be mindful of that as well. And refrain from posting any pictures on social media without the permission of the client, especially children. We do not take pictures of children and post them online. And some tips for co-sponsorship teams. The number one big thing is that things won't always happen as planned. There are a lot of things that we have to be flexible in this work. So we ask that you also become flexible with that as well. And it is not your job to solve all the problems the family faces. Your job as a co-sponsorship team is to support that goal of self-sufficiency. Like I said, we're walking alongside our clients in that. So please be mindful of that. If you have any really big issues that you think are concerns, please reach out to community engagement. And just another tip that I find super useful, you can post a calendar in the client's home so they're able to record appointments and when you're stopping by. And it will take time for the family to trust you. That's just, human nature a lot of times. So please be mindful in that. And please use your gifts as a group, gifts and talents. If you have a recruiter in the group, they can help out with resumes and interview skills. If you have somebody who taught English in school, you can have them doing conversational English with the clients and the family. If you have somebody who, um, let's say, who works in accounting, you can have them talk about budgets and loans and all of that fun stuff that isn't very known to a lot of people who are arriving here for the first time. So you're gonna have fun with that, get creative with the skills you have within the group. And organize your group more than anything so that so that everyone is making sure everything is clear. You can also educate yourself with the culture of the family. So you can have, I can, community engagement can provide some resources for that, but also you can look them up on your own. The internet's a great resource. And you can learn how to greet the family in their native language too. I think that's a really great way to establish some form of uh, familiarity. Another really big thing is maintaining that mode of communication. So whatever works for you in the group, WhatsApp's pretty international, and most of our clients will probably have that too. So the next step is forming and organizing your team. It's figuring out who your core members will be and who will be the support members, who will be the team leader, figuring out everyone's passions and gifts, and then determining roles and responsibilities, getting that schedule established, and getting organized. So with communication guidelines, we ask that the team lead be the point person, collaborating with community engagement. So as once that's established, community engagement will be the one that will be talking to the team lead the most. And also, if there happens to be an emergency, um, the case manager will go through that with them and what they should be doing on the first step, which is called the appropriate department. So also, I would also encourage you as a group to remind them of that as well. Some COVID-19 precautions, and other general health precautions. Please wash your hand sanitize your hands often. And if you experience symptoms of any cold, please just stay home and make sure the refugee client knows to inform you if they are sick before meeting with them. You can always feel free to ask with that. Another really general thing I want to tell you too is to please always have hand sanitizer, gloves, and a couple of grocery bags with you. This is just because some clients can have some car sickness, and if it does happen, at least you have those bags available. Um, and gloves, because we um, always encourage you to never have any contact with any bodily fluids or blood. That's really important. And that could come up with changing a diaper or anything else. So just always have it handy just in case. Another really big thing that I do too is that I will not move my car until everyone in that car has their seatbelt on. So that's also really important. And please feel free to do that as well. All right. And the next steps is picking that team leader. And everyone in the group who will interact with clients have to have that background check. You sign the commitment form, and then you organize your team and figure out what core services you will do, how will you communicate, and getting that whole process started. But thank you so much for joining me in this presentation. If you have any further questions, which I'm sure you do, please reach out to community engagement. Thank you.